Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get started here. Howdy. Welcome to February's meeting. Here, let me close this out. Everybody see the screen okay? Don't everybody answer at once.
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I want to make sure I've got this set up correctly here. So, okay. You notice I don't follow the normal meeting agenda process. I just put everything out there to see what we want to talk about. Of course, open it up to everybody else there. We'll just go a couple things here. Make sure you're looking at your listing on the FSDO DPE list and that you are listed on there for everything that you're qualified to do. Was there anything from the last meeting that anybody had wanted to discuss? Nope. Okay. All right. DMS issues. Let's see. Craig isn't on, is he?
I sure am. What you need?
Oh yeah, there you are. Okay. You're my DMS guru.
Oh, you're in trouble.
Yeah. So if I have any DMS questions, since I'm not even playing with it yet, does anyone have any DMS issues they'd like to bring up? Nope. Okay. All right. We're going to cover some endorsement and ground instruction.
Hey, Phil.
Yes.
Two things with regards to DMS. One, I was talking to Steve a few days ago, and he said that he had to manually input a disapproval. And lo and behold, yesterday when I did the disapproval, or 2 days ago, I had to manually input it. It did not populate for some reason. Is anybody else experiencing something like that? I mean, you populate with IACRA and all that. I mean, using the application, the applicant number, the FTN number, and haven't had any issues with doing the temporary or doing the successful one. But this is the first time, of course, I was out in January, and I was just kind of curious if anybody else has experienced anything with issuing or populating with IACRA using or having it come through and having to manually input the stuff. Steve, again, a couple of days ago, he experienced it. Then the day before yesterday, I experienced it.
Yeah, this is Bill Scott. I've had trouble with both the successful and the disapprovals. I'm using Chrome. I don't know if that makes a difference, but sometimes I think it depends on what you're using, whether it's Chrome or Explorer.
This is Ryan Albrecht. Pat, I don't know if this applies to your situation, but I have found that if I go in and try and do that too soon after the check ride, it doesn't work. And then if I step away for a day, then it works the next day. I don't know if anybody's run across that.
I tend not to do DMS immediately after the test. I wait until the end of or towards the evening and then do it. And normally it takes it real fast. I was a little bit surprised though.
One bit of general advice is if you haven't done it in a while, you should clear your temporary internet files on your browser. A lot of browsers call it your cache, C-A-C-H-E. It's always good to clear your cache periodically, especially if they're making updates to the website. I usually do my DMS on Saturday afternoons, and I have not had any problem, just whatever that's worth.
Okay. Any other DMS issues?
Hey, just I got a question or a comment on DMS. I guess maybe I got it wrong, but we want to be sending any updates or changes or requests to our managing specialists through their direct email and not just through DMS. They rarely check it. So Daniel Gridline, my MS said, hey, be sure you send me a direct email if you're going to send anything to DMS, because I guess they don't get any kind of notification that we've updated or requested anything or sent something in.
That is correct. We get nothing except a tiny little number in the top right of the DMS screen if we see it, along with the other 65 numbers that are up there. So
Are you saying that
Okay,
are you
then.
saying pre-approval requests should also be
No.
done by email?
Updates.
Oh, okay.
Hey, this is Craig. I would just throw in.
Just an example, if you
I would just throw in that we've been told on the FAA side that they recommend we use Chrome. So I can't speak to y'all side of it.
Yeah, I thought Chrome worked the best.
Okay. Anything else regarding DMS? Oh, okay. Got into some questions regarding the endorsements prior to the applicant's endorsements prior to the check ride, what was required. And Jeff and I had a conversation yesterday or 2 days ago about this stuff regarding the endorsement required or not required when someone does a home study course. So I'll let Jeff speak here. Jeff, go ahead and talk about what so it's coming from you, what we discussed regarding the absence of a endorsement for the aeronautical knowledge and the conditions under which that might happen.
okay, yeah. If you're looking, I'm pulling up the reg now so I get the numbers right. But the prerequisites for a practical test, that number does not say you have to look for the knowledge test endorsement. It says they have to have a knowledge test. So they show you the knowledge test, and that's proof that they passed. Now, whether or not they have an endorsement would depend on how they got their ground training, right? So in the advisory circular, 6165H, there's a list of all the home study options. And number 4 on that list, and I'll get the page here in a second when it opens, but number 4 on that list talks about an industry provided home study course. So something like Sporties, I guess, or I don't even know which ones are out there, and that says at the end of that, they will receive a endorsement or a statement or something, I forget the wording, but from an instructor from that provider authorizing the knowledge test. So the issue is they get that. So it's a legit endorsement with the CFI from Sporties, we'll say. Where does that paper or that endorsement go after their test? And in a lot of cases, I guess the testing center keeps it. So now they have no endorsement in their logbook because the testing center took it as authorization to take the test. Now, based on that and the advisory circular and the prerequisites for the practical, we do not believe that that's something that you have to confirm because they have the knowledge test in hand, which means they had authorization to take the knowledge test. The confusion is that when the reg says they have to have an endorsement that they've reviewed the home study course, that is number 5 in the advisory circular that says if the student made their own home study course or it wasn't an industry provided one, then there would be no endorsement to go take the test. Somebody has to give it to them, and to give them an endorsement, you have to review their home study course to confirm everything is done. So that's the 2 kinds of home study. And then there's obviously 141 and there's other stuff that kind of takes the replacement of an endorsement like that. So a home study course, I can think of 2 common scenarios. Is someone just studied on their own before they even went to a CFI and got all the bookwork done and was ready to take their test and wants to go take it. And the CFI has to check what they did. And that would be the one where you've reviewed their home study course. And the other one would be they did a Sporties or whatever company's one, and that company gives them an endorsement. I do not believe you guys have to see an endorsement to take the knowledge test prior to taking the practical because they already have the knowledge test in their hand. That's the best I could come up with at the day's notice, Phil.
Yeah, no, that's good. Anybody have any questions on that? So the individual may show up lacking 61-103, I think it is. I can't remember which one it is. The one regarding aeronautical knowledge. Hang on a second here.
Yeah, so the private pilot one is 61-103, and it says to be eligible for a private pilot, they must, and it lists everything. So, you know, they received a logbook endorsement from an instructor who conducted the training, or, so that's the thing is they did receive one because they went and took the test, but the testing center kept it because it came from an industry provider. So it's kind of, there's two people looking at these, right? The ones that before they take the knowledge test and then before they do the practical. So that to me, I read that 103 as a checklist for someone saying, what do I have to do to get my private? What do I have to do to be eligible for my private? All those things. And then what you guys do is look at 6139 of what they have to do prior to you giving them a test. What do they have to show you? And that's where you can go into the 6165 as well. And it tells you about the home study. And in 8900, in all of our guidance, when it goes step by step what we do, none of it says check for that endorsement. It says check that they have a knowledge test and look for, and that they have the endorsement for the deficient areas. Not one, and anywhere that I've read so far in the last day and a half does it say that that our procedures when we're giving a test is to check for that endorsement. It says to check for the knowledge test, completed knowledge test, and passing grade.
Anyone have any questions on that?
Now it's a good second set of eyes to look for it, and if you don't see it and you ask them, hey, where's your where's your ground training endorsement? Oh, I did a home study course from whatever company. Okay. I mean, that's a legit answer because they have to have that to take the test at the knowledge center. So now if they say, no, I did my own home study course, and well, who reviewed it? Oh, no one. Well, then maybe there's an issue, and I don't know how they would have taken a knowledge test at that point, but so it's like,
I was going to say, doesn't the flight instructor have to sign off on that in order for them to go take the written?
not if they did according to 6165H advisory circular, if they took the written from an industry provided home study course, they do not need the CFI. That home study course gives them an endorsement and they can go take it.
Jeff,
Right,
I think he's asking if you simply did your own home study, you created your own course, it would be impossible for you to be able to take the written without
Correct.
a CFI endorsement.
Correct.
So there'll still be a CFI endorsement for the home study course.
If it's your own, if it wasn't an industry provided home study, if you didn't buy a package from a vendor.
Yeah. I never even considered home study meaning that someone created their own course. I always thought home study was the Sporties or the Gleim or whatever, and always thought of it that way.
You know, a lot of ballooning is you create your home study course.
They called it. Yes, the super. As I just saw this really funny pop up. Actually, didn't see this. I missed this yesterday. Joe Biden made a prediction.
Somebody's got something going there.
Russ needs to mute.
Okay.
Eject. Hey, Phil. So this is Jim. Thank you, Jeff, for the update. That is good, useful information. I think we need to be careful to realize that part of this discussion that we're having now needs to understand that test proctors are human. And like Jeff just said, a second pair of eyes is good. I would not say that it's impossible for someone to take a written test without the endorsement, because the test proctor might have overlooked that, or they might not have understood their job. I've never been a test proctor. I know they receive specific training. I for one am going to continue making sure that they have the right endorsement, or at least have that conversation that Jeff just mentioned. But it's good to know that if they don't have it, or they say they gave it away, or it's in a file at home, that we can still continue with the test. That's good information.
One of the things that I would probably throw out there and to our guests that are listening in as well is that it'd probably be a good idea for that individual or the instructor who's working with that student to make a copy of the Sporties or King or Gleim completion certificate, because that's what they're using to go to take the test. They're using a completion certificate. They basically have to, I think they take a written test 3 times and get at least an 80 on it. And then an individual in some other part of the country there gives them the authorization to take the written test. Believe it or not, I had a written test authorization with laser grade back in the late 90s. And when you're talking about it being impossible to take a written test, let me tell you something. you walk in there with an endorsement that says, I certify that, with a name and a signature and a CFI number. And that's all you got. And believe me, we had found on a couple occasions where the student, the applicant, was not certified to take the test. This is when cut and paste became a phenomenon. So it can happen. So when you're saying that the proctors are humans and can make mistakes, keep in mind that there's no verification that that CFI who signed that endorsement was that CFI. Okay. But I'd recommend that they make a copy of whatever it is, so that it kind of eliminates, like you said, second set of eyes. Okay. Jeff, what did we come up with the phone picture of the written test results?
No final answer yet.
Okay.
I mean, it says you can log in and print a new one, so it would seem like it might work, but I can't find anything definitive because not everything's caught up to the new testing, the new knowledge test, except the fact that there's a new test and you can reprint right away. You don't have to mail in an application to get your new replacement one. So
Right.
if there's any question, they should be able to go to a computer in that room and print one, it sounds like. So
Yes, I would think so. This came up from a comment from someone regarding the particular place or individuals were simply showing the examiner their test results on their phone, a picture of it on their phone. So that's where this came from. Some people are accepting it and some weren't. So we're trying to find a consistent answer to that question. Any other issues regarding that item? Oh, okay. My point of contact, any reports from the
Phil?
point of contacts?
Hey, Phil.
Yes.
This is Jim. Sorry, I was slow on the unmute button there. One last one I just remembered on ground instruction. I don't have all the details, so this is not an exact scenario, but it's a likely one or a possible one. And that is, I was at a new school that I hadn't been at before, and having the instructor show me the applicant show me their logged ground instruction. And they mentioned that such and such other DPE says it's okay to just say, you know, lesson 27 done such and such day, you know, and I was like, well, you guys are part 61, right? And I think it's important for everyone to understand that under 141, of course, being an approved TCO, you know, lesson number such and such means something to the FAA. And you know, it may be okay to have a summary that says we did this lesson on this day, but in part 61, lesson number such and such, as great as that syllabus may be, it doesn't really mean anything to the FAA. So it's important that they're still logging the required areas of operation, at least the minimum required for the ground.
Yeah, I agree. When I do the CFI classes and we cover endorsements, I tell them they really want to write down what it is they did on that lesson. The sad thing is that anything that I encourage them to do is just in case something happens, that everything is, you know, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and everything that they did with that student is reflected in that logbook. Okay. Okay, any point of contact reports?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Brian? Is Brian still there?
I couldn't get it to unmute. No, I've checked in with everybody at Falcon and nothing to report.
Okay. Jim?
Nothing specific. I've gotten some positive feedback. People like that we're doing the point of contact thing. So, you know, encourage everyone to use this as a resource, take some of the weight off of Phil's shoulders. I got messages out to the places that I usually operate and let them know who their point of contact is. And so far, so good.
Okay. All right. Kim, I don't think Kim is on today. And who's that leave? Jared. I think, Jared, are you out there? No. That's right. He said he wasn't going to be able to make it today. So, well, oops. And Todd is up in Prescott, and Todd's not here today either, so nothing from there. Okay, the other next item here is cover a little bit more airworthiness requirements. And Ernie, you're out there?
I am.
There he is. Okay, now you turn everything on. So I chatted with Ernie a couple days ago, and what I'd like to do is try to have Ernie as a participant here each month, because there's an awful lot of airworthiness stuff. We have these questions all the time, and it'd be great to have Ernie answering these things at the time that we come up with them, or as a resource while you're out there. I get a fair amount of calls, and I do know a little bit. I'm able to answer some of the questions because of the A&P background, but overall, most of the time for some of those things, I'd rather have the FAA representative answering a lot of those questions. So one of them we'll start off with was, which Ernie and I discussed. There's an aircraft in the system that does not have a stall warning that is operative. And it was brought up to be used for a check ride. And the issues are, how do we find out if you can actually in-op a stall warning system on an older airplane that doesn't have a KOEL, obviously didn't have an MEL, and the manufacturer's equipment list normally in some of those older airplanes is nowhere to be found. That's been lost over the years. I don't know if anyone realizes, but you can get the original equipment list as it left the factory from the manufacturer. They all still have it. They actually have it, probably have converted from microfiche to CDs now, but in the old days they had it on microfiche and they could print you up a copy of what it came with. But one of the issues that we wanted to address for the DPE group and some of the guests is, how do we determine without the correct paperwork if that airplane is legal or not? So here's a situation where a stall warning system is not working on an airplane, and the examiner is trying to figure out if he or she can actually get in the airplane. Right off the top, I'd say err on the conservative side and say might not be able to accept this airplane until I investigate this a little bit further. And we also want to make sure that the people we're working with understand that they want to be careful about flying the airplane without certain systems working till they can confirm that that airplane is in fact airworthy or not airworthy. Could run into some issues with the FAA on flying an airplane under those conditions. But one of the other things that I wanted to chat about was when you all were looking at the sign-offs for the different inspections, progressive versus 100-hour versus annual. Some of the mechanics will write different verbiage down there. And what I wanted to do was have Ernie explain the concept of this airplane is, I've certified this airplane has been inspected in accordance with an annual inspection, or this aircraft versus airplane versus engine propeller. So you have the floor, Ernie.
So the bottom line is that when you're doing a sign off, doing an annual or 100-hour, you can only do it on a complete aircraft. And part of the aircraft systems are the engine and the propeller. So when you sign off in the aircraft logbook, if you let's say, for instance, that you have 3 logbooks, which 91-417 tells you you're supposed to have three ways to track engine, propeller, and aircraft. So if you have that system set up, if they sign off the annual and or 100-hour in the airframe logbook, that covers the engine propeller because they're a part of the aircraft. They're a part of the systems of the aircraft. You also cannot do a 100-hour or an annual inspection on an engine or a propeller. So if you have, let's say for instance, that you have an aircraft that went through annual March of last year, and in February, you take that engine off and you put it on a different aircraft, that engine's next annual is going to be whatever that new aircraft is. You do not, the only thing you have to do is inspect the engine for serviceability. However, most FAA inspectors will not complain or ding somebody for overkill. So if someone writes that they certified this airframe was airworthy through an annual, and then they do the same thing for the engine, the same thing for the propeller. All right, that's customer preference, but it's not a requirement. You have to have one sign off, and that sign off says what 4311 tells you to put in there. Anything else that's in there, such as rigging flight controls, flight control deflection, pressure or the compression, AD sign-offs, all that kind of stuff, that is a maintenance entry. That is 43.9. So everything you need to know about your entries is either 43.9 or 43.11. And then whatever you're required to do under 91.417 on is the owner operator's responsibility, although most maintenance people take care of it. So we were talking about deferring something. The litmus test on doing a deferral based on 91.213 is, number one, the airplane does not have a MEL. If your aircraft has an MEL, that's all you can defer is what's in the MEL. Doesn't matter what 91.205 says or anything else, you can only sign off what the MEL will allow you to sign off. So Craig and I were talking about this earlier. When Craig and I worked at Pan Am, we got a bunch of new PA-44s in. And I, in my infinite wisdom, decided I'm going to put these aircraft on an MEL because I want students to get the feel of working in an airline. And airlines operate off of MELs. So in the MEL, you can defer a landing light, you defer a taxi light, but our brand new PA-44s had recognition lights. And we had no way to defer the recognition light. So if the recognition light went out, it wasn't on the MEL, we couldn't defer it, airplane was grounded. Under 91.213, if you're using that without an MEL to defer your parts, your litmus test would be the equipment list, just like Phil said. So on newer aircraft, they have an equipment list toward the back. Cessna was smart enough to actually say, these are what we consider essential. So I would look through that essential list before I'd say, okay, I'll take it. And on Piper, most FAA inspectors, since Piper does not have any essentials equipment list, they just have an equipment list. If it's on the equipment list, you probably can't defer it. That's just the way that they see it. But the final thing is that if you're not comfortable with it, walk away. It's you. Any questions?
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Ernie.
All right.
Everybody, no questions on that? I can't emphasize enough, if you're not sure about something, err on the side of caution and get some answers from some other individuals. You'll find that, and Ernie knows this too, that the mechanics themselves are not exactly always on the same page through no fault of their own, just depending on where they were working and the type of operations they were under. So there's obviously some occasions where the mechanic may have made an aircraft airworthy when it might not have been, and vice versa. So just use your due diligence to find out as much as you can about the aircraft.
That's correct. So someone just asked about type certificate data sheet. So a type certificate data sheet is the aircraft birth certificate. And it has to meet all those requirements of type certificate data sheet. So one really good example is that I had a mechanic years ago. I helped a guy buy a 1955 V-tail Bonanza. They had a 520 on it. It was actually Continental 225, I think. And he took it over to an avionics shop and they refused to touch it because it had that 520 on it and said, there's no major alteration paperwork here for this aircraft. So I had to show the mechanic that under type certificate data sheet, that aircraft could have a 470 or a 520. There's no requirement to do anything but weight and balance because the type certificate data sheet already approved that engine. So that's a good place to go if you're not sure if something is supposed to be on an airplane or if the airplane is not configured properly. Go to type certificate data sheet because that gives you your time limits. That tells you what has to be installed on the airplane and what doesn't. You will notice that on a type certificate data sheet, there's almost never any avionics or radios. So that's up to the manufacturer or the purchaser. But yeah, type certificate data sheet is a great place to go. 91.417 through 91.425, I think it is, for all the maintenance requirements that are levied on the operators. So that's where the requirement for doing ADs comes from, and for making sure that ADs are signed off and that they are tracked by time, and et cetera. 43.9 is for maintenance documentation, and 43.11 is for inspection documentation. Okay. So, and of course, your pilot's handbook if the aircraft has one.
Say that again.
Pilot's operating handbook if the aircraft has one. Flight manual.
Yes, right. Which they all basically did after 78, but like, you know, the even the Beechcraft C-24s or whatever they are, the Sundowners, they have a manual. They didn't have to have one back then, but they do. So even though it's an airplane manufactured before 78, some of the manufacturers did actually have a serial number assigned AFM/POH to the airplane. So
yeah, I found them in old Cessnas and other aircraft like that, where the manufacturer did it voluntarily, because I think they kind of saw the writing on the wall.
Right. So just don't go by the date. Investigate a little bit further into that. Since the ADs came up, we have two kind of important ADs that just came up for Piper aircraft. I hope that everybody has become familiar with what's going on with those. Ernie, can you expand on those, why two of them came out?
Right. So the one that there's one that is in effect right now. Let me pull those up because I don't have them in front of me. But let's see.
Hey, Phil, while Ernie's looking that up, can I share a story about ADs real quick?
Sure.
So this was one that happened in the last couple of weeks that Ernie really helped me with. And basically, I was doing a private pilot for an applicant that has bought an old Cherokee 140, did their training in it. And like I usually do when I'm especially not at a flight school that I usually go to, is having the applicant send me records via email several days before our check ride. And all they had for the ADs was an annual inspection back in October, where the mechanic basically said all ADs have been complied with. And I wrote back and said, okay, that's great. Can you show me when they're next due? You know, like, how are you keeping track of your recurring ADs? And the applicant didn't have an answer. And turns out I kind of sent them down a rabbit hole or a spiral of, what do I need for this? And it ended up being educational. I admit I was not 100% sure whether that endorsement covered it. I just knew it was different than what I usually see. You know, we're used to seeing some kind of a record. And it was either you or Ernie got me pointed, or actually I think I just read part 91, 417. It very specifically says that there needs to be some method of tracking the recurring ADs, and doesn't say it has to be in the same logbook. It doesn't, you know, say exactly what it looks like, but there has to be some method for doing that. So we ended up rescheduling the check ride to give the applicant time to get everything together, and it was a real educational experience. And just another reason to, you know, be careful, make sure we're getting this stuff before the day of the test whenever we can. So thank you to you and Ernie for helping me on that.
Yeah, so without getting wrapped around the axle, we spent a lot of time talking with mechanics about how they sign off ADs. And it's pretty typical for them to go in and say that ADs were checked through this biannual date, or through, I'm sorry, this biweekly date, and no ADs are currently due, or whatever ADs they had to do, or whatever. But when they make that sign off, one of the important things is that they actually need to go back and check your records to see that there is a sign off. So anytime you comply with an AD, you have to, there's certain things in 91 that tell you exactly, you know, 91, I don't know if it's 91.417 or if it's 419, but anyhow, it tells you exactly what the wording needs to be for signing off an airworthiness directive and for signing off a recurring airworthiness directive. So that verbiage must be in your record somewhere, showing that that AD is complied with. And then for recurring ADs, our recommendation is that you have a status sheet and manage that status sheet yourself. So these two ADs, give you a little history on these two ADs. So if you have pencil or something of that nature, the first one is 2020-2405, and it affects all Piper aircraft models, PA 28-140 through PA 32-260. And then of course, there is a list of serial numbers specifically that it affects. In fact, it also affects the PA 32-300. So it shows the serial numbers. So that's the very first thing you're going to look at are those serial numbers to see if it applies to your aircraft. If it does apply to your aircraft, then there's some more information you look for that tells you what you have to do. So the reason behind these two ADs, the first one is for PA 28-140s, and the whole object of it is to inspect the left and right main wing spars for corrosion. And that one became effective December 28, 2020. And you have 12 months to do it. Let's see if it's more than just, yeah, it's either 100 hours time in service or 12 months after the effective date. The second AD, which is not the one I called up, that's not it. The second AD is 2020-26-16, and it specifically calls out inspecting the main spar box. So you're going to inspect the spar box and the caps to make sure there's no corrosion. The reason that this AD came out was because of the wing failure on that Embry-Riddle PA-28R about 3 years ago. So when they took that aircraft apart, nobody had missed an inspection item, and they had no reason to get into the spar to inspect it for corrosion. So they never did. So what happened is that ultimately they were taken off and they were heading out over the ocean, and the right wing, I believe it was, failed. So that's the reason for these. So this second AD, that one, there you are. Yeah, okay. So the second AD is for the spar box, and it takes effect, I believe,
February 16th.
Yeah, February 16th. And you have 30 days after it comes into effect to do it. And there's also some other parameters, and one of the parameters are that your aircraft was once used as either a flight school or any kind of for-hire aircraft where it got annuals and 100 hours, regardless of how they were signed off. Because I know some flight schools sign off every 100 hours an annual, so their annuals will never become due. They sign every 100-hour off as an annual. So this one covers PA 28-140s, also carries 150s, 151s, 160, 161s, 180, 181, 235, PA 28 R180s, R200s, R201s, R201Ts, and RT201s, as well as RT201Ts, PA 32-260s, and PA 32-300. So basically the same aircraft. However, when you go down to the applicability, when you get down to the applicability, it says all serial numbers, every single aircraft. It says all serial numbers. There are one or two exceptions. So like the PA 28-161, it accepts one serial number. PA 28R200s, it accepts one serial number. And then on the 28R201, there's a few more serial numbers, but for the most part, it's every aircraft. They're estimating right around $1,500 per aircraft per AD, because they want these eddy current. And of course, the time to disassemble the aircraft and separate the wings and do all the inspection. So all you Piper folks, make sure you take a good look at these ADs and see if they're due. Or if you're going to take a Piper up, make sure it's been done.
Mhm. Yep. For those of you that may not know how the AD numbers are generated, the first four numbers are obviously the year, and the ADs come out on a bi-weekly basis. So they're going to come out 26 times. And I think that one that you mentioned, Ernie, was actually the last one for last year.
Yeah, it's a 26. So you've got one came out 2020 on the 24th bi-weekly, and it's the 5th AD they wrote. And in 2020-26 came out on the 26th bi-weekly, and it was the 16th AD they wrote.
Right. That last number that Ernie's talking about, that's the number of that AD that was generated for that cycle. It's got nothing to do with the airplane like the 16th one for a Piper. It's as they generate the ADs, they start numbering them for that cycle. So if anyone's curious, or I think it's beneficial for you to know what the numbers mean, it'll give you an idea when the AD was actually issued, because that one that was actually issued in 2020, the last one Ernie read, isn't even effective till February 16th, which is 7 days from now. So, but it was actually written in the year 2020. So it's nice to know what those mean. Also, along those lines, when we're talking about acknowledging each AD, I don't have a copy of it here, but I had a ADs by compliance sheet that we used at the school I had. And if there's an AD that comes out, it has to be acknowledged by the mechanic as being, if it doesn't apply to the airplane, they have to state why. So when they do method of compliance, it has to say NA by model number or serial number or date or condition, i.e. the 9114-22 is the one we hate. That's the prop strike AD of Lycoming. And it's, you'd have to acknowledge in there that when that came out, wasn't applicable due to condition. And there was no prop strike. So that AD wasn't necessary to be done until there's a prop strike. So the owners or operators of these aircraft are supposed to have a list of the ADs and how they were complied with, even though some of them might have been back in the 70s or 80s. The popular one is the seat rail one for Cessna, but they updated that one. And you'll see that some of these numbers will be superseded. So might say the same thing, but they came up with a different number for the same AD. So for our benefit, just be careful out there, especially with these coming up now. There's a potential here for making sure that these airplanes are, as you know, most of the ones that we're dealing with here, the Pipers, I would bet, except for a couple of the new ones, have more than 5,000 hours time in service on them. That's when the AD is starting. Thanks, Ernie. Any other questions regarding that? No, Ernie, anything else?
No, that's it. But if you guys have questions, feel free to call me.
Okay.
Hey, Ernie, real quick. On that last one, the 2020-26, the 26 of biweekly, what was the 16 again represent?
That's just a sequence that it came out.
Okay.
That last number, Patrick, is in the last cycle, which was, there's 26 cycles, times 2 is 52 weeks. So that was the last cycle for the year for 2020. And that happened to be the 16th AD issued in the AD process. You could have had 3 Boeing ones before that, 4 Airbus ones, 2 Cessna ones. It's got nothing to do with the aircraft itself. It just happened to be the 6th one that was put into the registry for AD issuance. That's it.
16th one.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's 16 or more ADs came out in that 2-week period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there probably were more. There usually
There's
is.
probably more, but that was the 16th one that was released in that period.
And that happened to be the one applying to the PA 28s.
Right. So just remember, the earlier one applies to the wing spar, and the later one applies to the spar box in the fuselage.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They're going to be busy with that one for a while.
Yeah.
Because of the time on the airplanes. So just pay close attention to that, and I'm sure everyone's aware of it in the area here. But you guys are out there crawling in these things, so not just that AD, but all the other ADs. I encourage people to make it a point to become real comfortable with how to research ADs for the airplane that you're going to be doing a test on before you show up, and give yourself a little leeway on what ADs may be current or recurring for that airplane. So one of the ones is the fuel injection on the arrows. One of the most common misstatements on the check ride is that I can overfly my 100-hour by 10 hours. Is that true, Ernie?
You can, but there's a limitation.
Yep. And if an AD
limitation is you can't be doing it for revenue.
Yeah.
But you can only do it to move the aircraft to a facility to get the inspection done.
But I'm getting to the other issue, the one that's missed. If there's a 100-hour AD due on that airplane, you cannot overfly.
Yeah.
So what Piper did was they changed the 100-hour AD on the fuel injection system for their arrows to a 110-hour AD. So that took care of that problem. So the 10 hours were still accounted for in there to get it to a maintenance facility to do the inspection. But
also another caveat on that overflying a 100-hour. If you overfly a 100-hour by 5 hours, so you got 105 hours on the aircraft, when they do the 100-hour inspection, the mechanic is required to deduct the 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 95 hours left to your next 100-hour inspection.
Right. That's right. Unless you do them early, they should always be due on a 100-hour mark all the time. But obviously, occasionally, sometimes they get done early. So that's why you'll have the odd numbers showing up on those. And one of the things that we want to do as examiners and those out there listening is guess, when it comes to the records of the aircraft, it's a tendency for depending on the school or the instructor, type of operation, 61 or 141, that the applicant, we know, unfortunately, most of the time has only seen the logbooks the day before the check ride. But yet, when they soloed the aircraft, they were responsible for those maintenance records being in compliance. It's one thing if the instructor's in the airplane and he wants to accept that, or she wants to accept that, that's fine. But once that airplane goes out solo, that student pilot they're on their own. And I would like for the individuals that do the training for these applicants to take a little bit more time with the books prior to them soloing and explain to them, since they're responsible for determining the airplane's in a safe condition for flight. As the PIC, how do we do that? Well, I look at the maintenance records and I do a pre-flight inspection. So I always wondered how they knew that the airplane was in a safe condition for flight if they never saw the records till shortly before check rides. But it sure would make that a little bit, emphasize that a little bit more, that they should be seeing the records and understanding what they're looking at long before they are sent out in the airplane by themselves. Any comments on that situation? Okay. Also on ADs, there's a little bit more to the ADs than just being like a car recall on a car. That's mostly the answer you get. It would be a good idea if somewhere in the process of debriefing or at a point somewhere when they are done with the check ride, to explain to them that Part 39 has got a pretty good explanation of what really is going on with ADs, and that there are sometimes other methods of compliance depending on what the administrator wants to put out there for those. So
if you're not aware of this, I'm sure most of you have been taught this, but Part 39 is the largest chapter in 14 CFR. That's because every single AD is an amendment to that chapter, which is regulatory. That's how we can say you must do this. So every single AD is an amendment to Part 39. Just remember that. That's where the authority comes from.
Yep. The chapter itself, just looking at it, it's funny Ernie said that because it actually fits on one page in your FAR aim. It's only 17 items. But like he said, every single AD becomes a part of that CFR.
So yeah, so my advice, I've done a lot of these. I did for when I was still the geographic inspector. I volunteered to ramp and do maintenance record checks for all of our ops inspectors that wanted to go out and do a flight if they weren't sure about the airplane or they didn't know the person that they were going to do a check ride with. I would go out and do inspections for them. And you should feel free to do the exact same thing. If you're not an A&P and you're not comfortable with the airplane, I can tell you if you go there and you open up the records and it's a, 2 ditty bags with just papers and papers and papers flung in them, I'm not really sure I'd want to fly in that airplane. If it doesn't look like it's been taken care of, don't take it. Ask a mechanic to come look at it.
I'm glad you said that, Ernie, because I think it's a resource that a lot of us didn't realize that we have. Is at any time that example would have been that stall warning situation. Is anytime we're not comfortable with something, we work for the FAA, and there's no reason that they can't help us determine the airworthiness of the aircraft, because the majority of us don't have that kind of a background and don't know all the nuances of maybe looking at a crack on a wingtip, and the guy like Ernie can tell you whether that's too long, too short, it's okay, what a stop drill is and things like that. But appreciate that offer, Ernie, to help out when there's a situation like that. And the last thing on airworthiness, MELs, I know that Transpac / AirGuard used to have one. I don't think they utilize it anymore, but there's still a lot of confusion on what an MEL is. The biggest issue is that the question of something being inoperative and then not finding it in the MEL, the most common answer is that, yeah, I can go because it's not in the MEL. So we might want to spend a little bit more time. You can download MELs off the internet all over the place. And for those of you that are teaching it, my guests that are listening today, you can pull these things down and look at the preamble. If you don't look at anything else, read the preamble, and that will explain everything about an MEL, when things have to be fixed, how you operate with it, and then give your student an example of something that's broken that is in the MEL, and you'll see day VFR only, or things like, well, I actually had an MEL at my flight school, and we are actually allowed to fly with a fuel gauge inoperative that you couldn't under 91-205, but our MEL stated as long as we filled the airplane up with gas at each stop and didn't fly more than 3 hours and the other gauge worked, we were okay. We were legal to do that. That was one nice benefit of having one over not having one. But maybe if at the end of the check ride or whatever, if there's a little bit light on that, give them some guidance on what those things are. Some of them are going to head to the airlines, some of them aren't, but it'd be good for them to know, since we're required to test on dealing with inoperative components with and without an MEL. Okay. Any questions on that?
No, but I do have something to talk about that I've come across lately. As we're getting into some of these aging aircraft that are being fitted with newer GPSs and such like that, I'm kind of finding that people don't know a lot about what's required when you put in a new GPS or even new equipment. The having your supplements and anything that's required by the supplement too. I've come across that in a few schools where they had a new GPS in there, which was fine and dandy. In one instance, they had the new GPS in there, but it wasn't in the weight and balance. And so, and it didn't have the supplement or anything that went with it. So it wasn't qualified to be in that airplane as far as I understood. Further down the line, I've noticed that people don't really understand the supplements and the fact that some supplements may have limitations, just like your POH, that say, hey, you have to have these items in the airplane in order to go fly. So for example, the newest Garmin 430s that have WAS and are linked up with the Garmin TCX 330s, the new transponders, they have their own supplements. And in the Garmin 430 supplement, it requires that if the aircraft, or if you're using that GPS for navigation, that you got to have a pilot's guide in there, and it specifies the part number and such that goes with that, which is great. It also specifies in there that if that GPS is also being used with the transponder, that you also have to have another pilot's guide with a different part number in it as well. So the big thing is making sure that they are in there or on their iPad or whatever, which is all fine, and making sure it's the right one. I've noticed that people don't have the right ones downloaded, that we're going out to do instrument check rides and we don't have the right information, or they don't even know what they're looking for. So it's one of those, as we get with older airplanes, we've got to look a little closer. I mean, you get into a brand new Garmin G1000 where everything's this, brand new. It's, it should be coming with, what it was issued with. But now we've got older airplanes that have other equipment, and we just want to make sure that we're not being complacent about getting in an airplane and just trusting that everything is there. Have them show it to you. Where is this? Why is this on here?
That's a good point that you bring up, because it's actually a requirement of the alteration that before you sign it off as a mechanic or an inspection authorization or even a repair station, it's your responsibility to change the weight and balance and to install the supplement in the pilot's operating handbook. That all comes with it. So if you see that is an airworthiness issue. That aircraft is unairworthy if it's missing a supplement or if the weight and balance hasn't been changed.
Yeah, this has been kind of a flag I've been flying for a while, trying to get people on board with it. And the scary thing was finding out that when I'd find these airplanes, that nobody knew what I was talking about when I would say, hey, what about these supplements? And everybody, not just the applicants, the instructors, nobody knows that, a supplement is basically a mini POH for that GPS or that transponder. And it became concerning to me that, we're going out to these fleets of airplanes that all look the same and just hopping in, expecting them to all be perfect, and they're not. And so we've just got to take a moment to take a look to make sure they are, so that you're doing your job and you're getting into a clean paperwork airplane.
Yeah, and you're referring mostly to Chapter 9 of the POH/AFM.
Yes,
So
and
I just want to clarify that for the individuals that may not understand where you would find those. Now, an airplane like some of the older ones, the older Cessnas, if you put a Garmin 430 in it, you took the Cessna 300 Navcom out and put the Garmin 430 in it, just so you know, there is times when the weight and balance change is listed as negligible. Mm-hmm. So you may not see a new weight and balance. The mechanic does have to sign off either on a 337 form or somewhere in there that a radio is removed and put back in. Weight and balance. How's that written, Ernie? Weight and balance change negligible or something?
Weight and balance is negligible. No adjustment weight and balance as the weight and balance is negligible.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, if you have an airplane, an older airplane that doesn't have its own assigned POH or AFM, that supplement still needs to be somewhere. Normally, people would put it in a side pouch, or like the Garmin 430 that were put in some of the older 172s out Chandler. It'll be in a pouch, you know, either behind the pilot's seat but that is one thing that both the examiners and the instructors want to take a little bit more time with. Is when you get in these airplanes, you're also assuming that every single placard that's supposed to be on that airplane is on there. And I know realistically, are we going to open up the book and look at every single placard? Probably not. But that's one thing that the students don't actually know when I do go through airworthiness is, you know, how do you know this has the correct placards? I'm happy with, well, I'll look in chapter 1 or 2, I think it is, limitations is 2. And, you know, that's where I would go. So I'm happy with the fact that at least they know where to go to look to see if the placard is by the fuel cap or, and regarding that, there's some airplanes, 172s out there that have the avoid slips with flap extended placard scratched over, removed, or whatever. You can't do that. That's a required placard in that airplane. So if you do run across those, just mention that they may want to replace that placard. Keep that airplane legal. But yeah, chapter 9 is missed a lot in the airworthiness. And I know that, you know, it says to be familiar with POHs and AFMs. We could probably spend a little bit more time on that process. Thanks.
No problem.
Any other comments regarding that issue? Okay. That's what this is right here. One of the things that unfortunately I have a lot of time on my hands is getting on YouTube and seeing these interesting YouTube videos about instruction for getting your private pilot certificate. And the one thing commercial, one thing that I notice is there's still a lot of old wives' tales / folklore / my instructor said information out there. In the process of debriefing or working with the instructors, encourage them to actually read what the regulation actually states. The references are all in there for each item in the ACS and the PTS. But a lot of times I realize they find out they don't even know where to find something, or, well, that's just what my instructor told me, so that's what I'm going with. But you'll find that there's things left out, i.e. we talked about it last time, is do you have to have fuses in the airplane, extra fuses? Well, only if they're accessible to the pilot. If they're not accessible to the pilot, they don't have to have them. I just heard one the other day where you also have to carry extra circuit breakers because no more fuses. So we went to circuit breakers. So I guess it was changed to, you also have to have extra circuit breakers. So just make sure that when we're debriefing the individuals, that they actually are aware of the wording in the documents, the CFRs or the PHAC or whatever, about what those things really say. Okay, we already covered the point of contacts and, oh, preventative maintenance. The questions on preventative maintenance, I don't expect them to know the 31 items that they can do to the airplane, like for them to know where it is. Make sure they understand, and Ernie brought it up before, that because you are dealing with people that own their own airplane, and they are allowed to do that, those items to their aircraft, but they also want to be made aware of how are they supposed to sign off the logbook. So I will have a tendency with an owned airplane, to spend a little bit more time on the preventative maintenance part. Do you understand what you need to write in the logbook if you do change a tire or a landing light or replace a nav bulb, so they understand what it is they want to be, how the verbiage is. And Ernie mentioned that before. It's, what is it, 43.9, I think, Ernie? Or
43.9.
And 43.11 is inspection stuff, which they're not really going to get into, but it tell you in there how to write it up. And it sounds silly sometimes, but I'm gonna tell you something. All this is about what I call the COL situation in a court of law. So make sure you understand exactly what you need to be writing down. They understand what they need to be writing down, because they don't want to have a situation where they have an accident or an incident and come to find out that there was something they did to the airplane that had nothing to do with the accident or the incident, but it was determined that the maintenance wasn't correctly logged, because these people nowadays are looking for anything they can. You can see enough instances out there where they're doing whatever they can to keep from paying. The insurance companies are getting a lot stricter about paying out the claims.
I'd like to clarify something else too. There's a distinct difference between preventive maintenance and servicing. So I've had pilots argue with me. So I've got to write down, I have to make a maintenance entry every time I add oil to my airplane. Well, no, you're servicing your aircraft. Same with putting air in the tires, you're servicing it. You're servicing it when you put fuel in it, when you wash it, when you wipe the, when you clean your windscreen. That is all servicing, it is not preventive maintenance. Items that's in Appendix A of paragraph C, those are preventive maintenance.
Thanks. That's exactly right. That's not covered very well either. Okay, covered that and covered that, covered that, covered that, covered that. Okay, covered most of that stuff. Need to get past that. Okay, it's open now to anybody that wants to discuss any issues or topics that we haven't talked about. DPEs first. Is there anything the DPEs want to bring up? Okay, we have some guests out there. I see them on the list here that have some questions that they want to throw out to the group. Rick, are you still there? Rick Coral?
Yeah, I'm here, Phil. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So we'll start with yours.
Okay, so my question has to do with the, on a practical test, the difference on the cross-country planning task between private pilot and commercial pilot applicants, because the task elements are exactly the same. Are applicants being evaluated exactly the same on a private pilot as well as a commercial practical test?
Anyone? Basically, Rick and I chatted about this before. He was curious that there might have been different parameters set for the commercial pilot, i.e. longer leg lengths, utilizing different types of avionics, navigation versus what a private pilot might use. Does any one of the DPEs want to comment on what they are looking for, if any difference at all between a commercial and private student? Let's see, who's talking?
I'd have to look, but I believe there's the tolerances are a little bit tighter, are they not?
The tolerances are tighter, and Rick is primarily talking about the planning of the cross country, i.e. you do your nav log and you have points 5 miles apart. As a private pilot, you may have, and some of our group may encourage a longer stage length between checkpoints, since they're—
Well, the difference between encouraging and measuring, I think we need to be careful as DPEs. We don't want to be interjecting our preferences or our techniques. Our guidance comes from the materials that are used as reference materials. So what the reference materials say, and then also that conversation in the scenario is allowing the applicant to give us the why. What's their risk aversion? What is the why they decided to pick 5 miles versus 10 or 20 mile legs, et cetera?
Of course. Does anyone else have any comments about how they might look at a commercial planning versus a private pilot cross-country planning?
I'll share a couple comments. This is Jim. So I write as part of my pre-test briefing for a commercial applicant. I point out to them that a lot of the ACS items are very similar to what they had when they did their private check ride. But the FAA really is looking for a deeper level, a higher level of knowledge on the commercial. So I kind of set that bar, right out of the gate. About the same time, I'm reminding them that they don't have to be 100%. They don't have to, remember everything off the top of their head. They can look things up as needed, that kind of thing. But I think just thinking about this question in context, for me, it's really more of the scenario, the private pilot scenario on the ground portion, where usually, the scenario is like you're taking a friend on this trip. It's for fun. There's a reason to do the trip, but it's really usually more of just a private pilot going out and using their certificate. On the commercial, it's usually more like, okay, you work for this company. There's more urgency. There's more weather challenges. There's more time restrictions. And so I'll kind of dial up the scenario, and because I think that's realistic. If you're a commercial, if you're using your commercial certificate to do this VFR cross country, it's probably going to be all of those things, compared to a private. So I don't know if that helps, but overall, you're right. The tasks, the topics, all that kind of stuff from the ACS is pretty much the same, but the FAA really wants to see that they're at that higher level.
Hey, anyone else? Rick, do you want to talk more about what you were running into with that? Hello.
Oh, there we go. Couldn't get the unmute button. Yeah, and the problem was, it was secondhand knowledge or secondhand comments, but it had more to do with a debrief on a commercial check ride over at our flight school that the comments were at least taken by the applicant and one of our other managers that on the commercial, the legs should have been planned much, much longer than they would have been planned on a private pilot practical test. Kind of hard for me since I wasn't, involved in the discussion there or part of the scenario that was kicked around. But then the other thing, the follow on to that is, to what degree are legs using GPS navigation allowed on either private or commercial? I know looking at the ACS, we're talking, pilotage, dead reckoning, use of navigation radios. To what degree could certain legs be GPS direct?
That's a good question. So
can I take that one, Phil?
Yeah, you betcha.
So I'm passionate about this one because I feel it falls into the same thing as using an autopilot or an iPad, with ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot or any of those things. We need to treat the check ride as the real life scenario that it's meant to be. So I brief my applicants, show me what you're going to do in real life. If they want to go GPS direct, that's great. If they want to use the autopilot, that's great. As part of the scenario on the ground and in the flight, they should also expect things like, okay, you just flew into an area where they're doing GPS jamming and GPS is no longer working. What are you going to do? And obviously the training needs to cover using those tools and what to do when those tools are not available. But the check ride scenario, I think it's very clear. We have the direction from the FAA. It's a practical test. Practically in real life, show me what you're going to do out there. And then it's up to us as the examiners to make sure we check all the boxes and evaluate everything we need to for the ACS, through the different scenarios. So does that answer it, Rick?
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
The question with some of us has been, is GPS considered radio navigation? So I'll throw that one out there. Or is radio navigation just limited to VOR and NDBs?
Well, I think GPS is defined as a type of navigation. I believe radio navigation is defined as VOR, NDB. I'd have to check the reference, but I think they're distinctly identified differently.
Well,
This is
yeah,
Bobby, by the way.
yeah, it depends on where you're looking too. So unfortunately, it's described two different ways.
Yeah, there's ground-based navigation descriptors, and I believe that's the knowledge element somewhere. Let me go look.
And
I'll be
like
right back.
like I did before was I had them plan the cross country, period. You know, did I see pilotage and dead reckoning in there somewhere? That's what I had to see as one of the items that I had to look for.
Yeah.
So
Commercial,
yeah, go ahead.
commercial ACS navigation, area of operations 6. Knowledge is ground-based navigation knowledge, satellite-based navigation.
Mhm.
And then in the skills, the use of airborne electronic navigation systems, determine the airplane's position using navigation system, intercept and track given course, radial bearing as appropriate, etc.
Right. So what changed when the ACS came out was they now refer to it as ground-based navigation, satellite-based navigation. And some of the books that didn't change, they still refer to that as radio navigation. So the ACS split it, you know, with the correct terminology, because that's what it is, ground-based,
Yeah.
satellite-based. So
And Phil, to a finer point, in the skills section, there is a task to recognize and describe the indications of stations or waypoint passage, if appropriate, and then recognize signal loss or interference and take the appropriate action if applicable. So I think, again, like Jim was saying, it's a scenario-based context of if there's jamming, can you identify it? And if that's not available, can you use other means of navigating?
Right. Right.
And isn't there something in the back, Bobby, in the appendix of the ACS that basically says if it's installed in the aircraft, we're required to test them on the equipment?
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
You are correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Rick, did that get across to you what you were looking for?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it technically it shouldn't make any difference. The cross country is planned, however it's planned in a practical sense, and the examiner would have the opportunity to say the signal coverage, you know, you got a rain message. I always like to ask, how would you know if you got a rain message? That most of them don't even know what it looks like. They don't know what it looks like on a Garmin 1000 versus a King KLN 94 versus a 430. It's interesting. They can tell you about rain, but they honestly don't know what it would actually look like if they did get a rain message. I think it
isn't that precipitation on the windscreen?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, precipitation.
Right.
You mean
turning
rain?
the mic off.
You mean rain? I don't have a master's, Bobby. So you're talking about rain?
Just continue the meeting, please.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. Any other questions from any of our guests or comments, either one?
Hey, Phil.
Yes.
Chuck Schroll in Tucson. Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good. Can I complain about something? It'll only take a minute.
Sure.
3-letter abbreviations, you know, so common in aviation. I just jotted down a few top of my head. FAO, FAA, FBO, FAR, AIM, CFR, GPS, ILS, ADF, NDB, VOR, DME, VFR, IFR, VMC, IMC, PAR, DAR, ATP, AME, ASI, CFI, PTS, ACS, DPE. You see where this is going? When are we going to get BFR back?
I don't know. It's been gone for a long time, but do you know why that disappeared?
No.
I can tell you, and I'm sure that a lot of my peers online here will tell you the same thing. I still hear people tell me that they need a BFR. Okay. They're not going down because of that, but here's what I'll hear, Chuck. I need a biannual flight review. And I said, you got to go twice a year? And they look at me and go, what? I said, well, you said biannual. That's twice a year. They don't even understand, Chuck, that there's two different words, biannual versus biennial. And many years ago, someone actually wrote that in there. And that's back when John Lynch was doing the questions and answers, the FAA legal responses. And it got so confusing that they just dropped the word biennial. It's real simple, but I still hear it. There's people that went away about 15 or 16 years ago. It's just like magnetic compass. The CFRs haven't said magnetic compass for about 15 or 16 years as well. They changed it to magnetic direction indicator. Because if you're going to be flying a new Piper right now with the advanced Karma 1000, you're going to be hard pressed to find a magnetic compass. They just aren't out there anymore. They're not building those. But that's all I can tell you. But for a minute there, I thought you were doing your impression of Robin Williams from Good Morning Vietnam.
Well, can I still say BFR? Because all my old glider boys, they don't know what a flight review is. And a BFR. Oh, yeah, BFR.
Chuck, you do whatever you want. Just don't send them to me.
All right.
Yeah, but that's why the word was so convoluted between. But I actually still see stuff on YouTube made in the year 2020 that talks about I just sent a comment to a gentleman about a week ago where he talked about the biannual flight review that's required as part of pilots' recurrency requirements.
Hey, Phil.
Yes.
Real quick, and I got to get running to the crew van, but thank you for bringing that up. This obviously isn't a real serious thing, but I actually went searching once. I don't have the reference right now, but I think I found an advisory circular, and whatever FAA department wrote this advisory circular, it basically said that the reason that they dropped the word, or they changed it to flight review, isn't about just the confusion that you mentioned, but it's also because the FAA is encouraging pilots to get with an instructor for recurrent training more than just once every 2 years. Even though that's still the minimum requirement, with things like the WINKS program, they wanted to get rid of the whole 2-year reference and just call it a flight review. So I encourage people to call it a flight review and not abbreviate it, just to achieve that goal of, hey, when do you need a flight review? Whenever you need to get proficient.
Right. Right. Well, we still have, along those lines, we still have people that'll say, every 2 years, which we know is not correct. And I don't know why it's so hard to say calendar months in aviation, because almost everything is calendar months. There really isn't anything that's years, except for, believe it or not, the registration certificate renewal on Part 47 says has to be renewed every 3 years and is due at the end of the 36th month that it was issued. So they say 3 years, but then they go right back to counter months. But Chuck, I'll tell you what, do what you want. You're down here in Tucson. You guys do what you want down there.
It's the Wild West.
There you go. Okay. Anyone else? Questions, comments? And who's left? I think Craig and Rock are the ones left from the FSDO. Anything from you, gentlemen?
This is Craig. Nothing here.
Okay. And you guys saw the email from Jeff regarding Jeff had to take off regarding the April 28th meeting. And Craig, I'm assuming that's a Zoom meeting, right?
That will be. Yes, it'll be a virtual meeting, unfortunately.
Yeah, just like before. Okay.
We do think we're going to use a different format that might be a little more conducive, but we'll more on that later.
Okay. Let me see. Jim, are you still there? No, I think
he had to catch the crew van.
No, actually, he's still.
I'm muted. I'm packing up as we speak. What do you got?
Anything from the AFTW for our information?
Nothing off the top of my head. Most of the communication, as little as it is, happens through the Facebook group. So if you're not there, go search for it, do a request to join. Next meeting is a month from today, immediately before this meeting.
Okay. And do you follow the, what's the other group is the,
ASAG?
Yeah,
Or
ASAG.
the POG?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not usually able to attend regularly, but I don't know of any updates to
I
share
know,
here.
I know that the POG has not had a meeting in a while. They, due to the COVID issue with using the Tempe History Museum. So they haven't had anything as well either. Ernie, are you still there? Nope. Ernie had to take off too. Anyone else have anything at all? Nope. Okay. Well, thanks again, y'all. Appreciate the input. The next one will be on, where is he there? March 9th, I think it is. There it is. March 9th, exactly 1 month from today. I don't anticipate one in April due to the FSDO meeting. I don't think that we'll need to have one then. But once again, I appreciate any input from anybody. I'm looking just to be a conduit to get the information out there and you know, have ideas from as many individuals as possible to disseminate across the group. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Phil.
Yep. See you later.
See ya.
Beautiful.